All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Clairvoyant Conversations. I'm your host, Alexander Creek, and today I have on the fabulous Dana Camp. She is somebody that I've known about for a little over a year. She's she's an intuitive numerologist like myself, but also like myself, we have a bunch of other modalities that we're working with. Dana is not only an intuitive numerologist, she is a perception coach, an angelic facilitator, an acutunist, among, I think, a couple other modalities, perhaps. So let's go ahead. Welcome to the show, Dana. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much. I was so excited to have the invitation.
Awesome. I've been aware of you. We were talking a little bit, and Dana warned me that she was a 3 life path, and that
Yep.
3s have a reputation for chatting. And so we were gabbing actually quite a bunch before we started recording this. So I was like, yay. So the vibe is good. So welcome, Dana. I'm so excited to have you on. It's rare to meet another numerologist, just to begin with.
I only have a couple that I've actually met in person or talked to. Yeah, there's not that many. And there's not any who do what I do professionally full-time in Omaha. So
nope. Yep. I can pretty much count. I when I was in Sioux Falls, I was definitely the only one there. And then I'm in Minneapolis now, and I don't really, I do mostly, I think, intuitive readings now with there's always some numerology to whatever I do. It is the first thing I learned. It's kind of how I got on my sort of spiritual path. So that's always kind of blended in there. When you talk to people, do you have not that I'm always trying to guess people's numbers, but sometimes you just have a vibe like, ooh, you're giving me so much 8 energy,
right.
at this moment.
Oh my God. My family literally expects it. My friends and family expect it. When I meet somebody, they watch me to see what I'm going to say to somebody.
Totally.
And then I totally guess the vibrations of the characters on TV too. I'm like, oh, that's this archetype and that's that archetype. And and my family's like, don't predict don't ruin the show. Sorry.
That's funny.
So I have to be careful not to oh, that character's like this and it's probably going to do that. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
I'm constantly assigning numbers to characters, or there's maybe some astrology, but when you see when I see some sort of I don't know, tower moment, right? I'm like, oh, there's some 16/7 energy here. Or I'm constantly putting together Buffy the Vampire Slayer's chart. I'm like, I wonder if she's a 1. No, she might be a 3.
Spends a lot of time in her head, could be a 7. She struggles with the faith and doubt constantly.
Totally. Yes.
She probably has an 8. She has an 8 birthday, but she has a 7 life path. And I'm
totally.
the same way.
Yes. Okay. That's hilarious. I appreciate
And Buffy,
that.
You had to shout out Buffy, which was that's one of my favorite shows. I hope they remake it, but they better do it properly.
I still the original still holds up. I tend to skip the first season. I know that's
the first
criminal.
season was, her discovering herself.
Yeah. I'm just, I usually kind of jump in season 2 or 3. I'm yeah. So,
and the musical is my favorite.
Absolutely. And
that's my favorite episode.
It was the first one that kind of kicked off all these other musical episodes on TV. So yeah. Anyway, a couple Buffy super fans. I appreciate that. So, okay. So you're in Omaha, Nebraska. Yes,
I am. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I own a center. I have a wellness center called Soul Work Center. I call it the Spiritual Happening Center. I have a full-time office there, and then I have a couple other practitioners who rent full-time from me. And then I offer a 900 square foot classroom for other spiritual practitioners to come and share their gifts and teach classes and workshops and a place to gather.
Awesome. Okay. That's lovely. I think that kind of thing is becoming a little bit more common, but it's still a rarity, I think, especially in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. When did you so tell me about how you kind of got on this path. What did you start out with? How long have you been doing this? Kind of what called you to working in, I call it woo. I think woo is it's a fun word, but working in the intuitive realm, kind of how did you get here?
Well, I started out I knew things without understanding how I knew them, even when I was very small.
Right.
I struggled in my teenage years. I think everyone who has gifts really doesn't know how to apply what they're understanding what they're getting.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of shut it off. And then right around 30, which was one of my pinnacles,
Mm-hmm.
33,
Mm-hmm.
I was working graveyard shift for 10 years at a
Yeah.
hospital.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know what an empath was. I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
why I had unconsciously been protecting myself because I
Mm-hmm.
was picking up on so much stuff. And I heard Glennis McCants on
Wow.
Coast to Coast AM.
Cool.
And so when she started talking, when I was a kid, I tried tarot, I tried all kinds of different tools, divine tools,
Mm-hmm.
just to see, like, I know stuff, but how do I know this? And nothing really resonated and nothing really
Mm-hmm.
clicked. And then I heard Glennis McCants. And when she started talking, it was like she gave me the way of explaining what I've always known.
Right.
And so really, I just found out that numerology was just my divine tool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I really worked at it. When I found it, I just grabbed it, and I probably did thousands of people's numbers, just anybody I could get, famous people, serial killers. Like, I wanted to understand humanity on this vibrational level, right? Because to me, numerology has evolved more than just, and even then I didn't realize that numerology was a spiritual thing.
Yeah.
I thought it was more science-based.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out I think of it as the blend of science and spirituality, really, because it can apply to people who aren't spiritual, and it can also apply to people who are. So I feel like it's kind of like ground floor help when people start coming into their spirituality. Can really be like a very grounded way of bringing them in.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing that, and then my friends and family were like, "Oh my God, you should do this for people. Like, you could do this." And then I did it at a fair a couple of times, and I was like, people really enjoy this. It's really helping people. And then I had another big pinnacle shift.
Mm-hmm.
And
pinnacle shift, by the way, for people who are asking, I kind of define it as like a big chapter of your life. How do you define a pinnacle in
pinnacles? People have 4 major pinnacles. I think of them as seasons of your life.
Cool.
So like
Mm-hmm.
the spring is like from like birth to like mid 20s to mid 30ish. And then you
Mm-hmm.
have 2 more 9-year cycles that coincide with your personal years, which are 9-year
Mm-hmm.
cycles. And then your last one is like everything you culminatedly learned. And then you live that out for the last one. So to me, like the shifts that happen is like these bigger events happen on these pinnacle years.
Yeah.
Where you really shift. It's like a growth spurt. It's like if you were a caterpillar, you're going into your chrysalis. And then when you're coming out of your chrysalis, you're turning into your butterfly, right? Like, so it's kind of like phases of growth, really, as a human. So for me, I had these big moments, and didn't even know it then. I didn't even know what a pinnacle was for the first 2 pinnacles. And then I learned about pinnacles, and I was like, wow, holy moly, this is even more magical to me. Every time I look at something and I go, oh, what year did I get that divorce? And I look and I go, and I started thinking about my divorce in a 7. I fought through it in my 8th, and in my 9th, I let it go. And then I started over again in my 1st. So like, when you look at that, it's so validating. And it really made me feel comfortable. Like I felt better about who I was and where I'd been, and that really realized that this is what we came here to experience, and I'm just on track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those years where it's like, it just brought me a profound sense of peace. Like, cause years where I kind of felt like I screwed up, or I had like very difficult, when you look at my chart, when we had like, I went through like several years of like an abusive step parent, like kind of turbulent family. It was all 6s and 9s, right? So it's all like this heavy family emotional energy those years, like exactly timed out.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it's really powerful to be able to understand like the general vibration of what each number represents, and then to see it in layers in your chart. So you see it in what season you're in, or your pinnacle, right? And then you look at the personal year, and then when you take into consideration also the world year and how that's impacting your personal year. Like there's so many beautiful layers to us. And then when you look at our own layers, you look at your own chart, and you look at why you're here, the attitude you live it out with, your gifts, your personality, your soul, like all these different layers to you. It's kind of like when people say, oh, I'm a Leo. And I go, you're so much more than a Leo.
Totally. Yeah. I'm like, what's
you're
your
so
moon?
much
What's
more
your
than your
rising?
life path, right?
Yes, totally.
You might be a 9, but you have 3 5s in your chart. I can't even feel your 9 right now.
Yeah.
So
my chart is loaded with 7 as well. So I look at my chart and I just kind of think, like, I had no chance of not doing something like this for a living, if you know.
Well, I mean, to fulfill your passion, to honor your vibrations, right? Because that's how I look at all the numbers. Everything for me, and this is something that's come into my sphere of like the umbrella of my business, of what I do, of how I help people. It's all frequency. Numbers are labels for frequency. Frequencies attract your experiences, right? All of everything from the tuning forks to the numerology to even working with the meridians with the touch for health, like all of that stuff is all tied together. Like it's so beautifully tied together. And then you add in the angel numbers, which are also frequencies, and like holy moly, like it's all here, and we just have to learn to interpret it.
Let me ask you about angel numbers. People ask me that a lot. You know, I see this repeating number, like, what does it mean? I have to say that's kind of not where my interest lies. I'm always like, well, there's some sort of synchronicity going on or some sort of message. I guess, do you have like set meanings for those numbers that are repeating for people, or kind of what's your kind of go-to?
Well, for me, what it means when people are starting to see those numbers is that they've reached a frequency where they're in a line with a divine, and they're able to see that they're being watched over, cared for, that they're protected, that everything's going to be okay, kind of thing, which is interesting because they're never not there. We just weren't in alignment with them at the time. But for me, I'm very much about not rewriting what's already been done. And when I find somebody that I resonate with, like Sacred Scribe Angel Numbers is a website that I vibrate with everything that she says, everything that she has written regarding these frequencies and her downloads about what the angel numbers mean. She's got them all written down and explained by digit in combination. Like I love her for she's clearly got a gift for explaining it. And they pick the right person to channel that through, because hers is great. And she's got clear into the 3000s where she's explained. And I catalog that. I have her website on my phone and I have it as a button. I saved it. And then anytime I get something that keeps popping up, I'll just go look at her index, and you can just click on the index and pull it all up.
Okay. So you said it was Sacred Scribe Angel Numbers? Okay, cool. I'm gonna remember that just as a resource, because I'm like, because I know what the number means. You know, like I know what each sort of digit means, but that's not my area of expertise.
Well, she breaks it down by individual digit, and then the total and the overall meaning of what those blends mean together. So, but the bottom line is, if anybody wants to know what the angels are trying to tell them, it's that you're being taken care of, and everything's okay, and you're on track. Boom.
Yes, totally.
That's the bottom line.
Completely agree with
people
that.
who are excited about it want to look up each one. That's cool. I did in the beginning, until I realized the messages were almost all the same. In the end, it was that you're doing good, keep going.
So when you do, when you're, I kind of discovered more of my sort of straight up intuitive abilities through doing numerology readings. And like I would, you know, when I'm like sitting down with a client's chart and I'm like preparing it, it's like I would get emotions, feelings. I'd be like, do you have, like, I would like see dogs. I'm like, oh, I feel like this person has dogs, you know? So I'm feeling something similar kind of happens to you. You're not just sort of reading the numbers by rote. You're really kind of tapping into their energy. And I kind of feel like it even goes as high as, it feels like you're kind of, for me, it felt like we're like in Akashic Records territory a little bit too, because it feels like you're kind of getting some information about where they have been as a soul before this lifetime.
Right. And I also use my sessions. They're very interactive. Like if you like, I'm not here to guess for you.
Yeah.
I'm here to help you understand why.
Yeah.
And so when we break it down, and it really helps me if I'll explain to them, okay, this is what it looks like when you're coming from a place of fear. And this is what it looks like when you're coming from a place of love. And then they kind of check in with themselves and go, oh yes, totally in fear. And I go, and then we go down and we talk about what that looks like. And then we talk about how our perception can shift when we shift our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then I give them the tools to help them shift into a more joyful vibration. So really, that's why I call myself more of a perception coach. Yes, numerology is the foundation that I use, but also like, I didn't always have intuitive before numerologist. It was just numerologist until the last 7 years has really like escalated, and the frequency work came in and the angelic work came in. And I was like, wow, there's so much more to this than I thought. And this is really just, it's kind of like a key for me to understand. The chart is really for me. It's really not for them. It really helps me help them understand themselves.
Totally. Yeah. And like, I always send a copy, but I'm like, just listen to the recording. You know, I'm not sure what you're going to get from like looking at the number, but it's a nice visual aid if you want to learn numerology yourself.
And I have like the chart on the back. So like my sheet has, I break it down and I have 4 columns for people that are important in their life. And I calculate those people, and then I show them across the board, like, this is why this person, this is where their heart is. This is where, so because there's a lot of misunderstandings, we always see the world and expect it to look at life the way we do.
Totally.
And so when we think about that, and I go, you're hurt because they're seeing this from a different perspective than you are. And if you can see how they're perceiving, then you can maybe adjust and not take anything personal that they do. And it also ties in, I don't know if you use this too, but I also talk a lot about the love languages, because that has a huge amount to do with it. Certain vibrations lean very heavily towards certain love languages. So if you can understand that him not spending time with you, but buying you gifts is the way he says he loves you.
Yeah.
It still might not be your chosen. It still might not be what fulfills you. And you still might not stay in that relationship because of it. But just know that does not mean they don't love you. It just means that they're not willing to change the language they talk in to be with you. So
what kind of dominant energy does that person have that you're kind of describing, by the way?
That would be,
you say like
I would say an 8. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And particularly occasionally, depending on like if there's ones and 8s in there, I feel like I was married to a 1 with 3 8s in his chart.
Wow. Okay.
So I have a lot of, I know a lot about that one in particular.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it was on his terms, the way he wanted to receive it. And he wanted to give the way he wanted to give. And he wanted me there when he wanted me there. And that's just how he rolled. And until I had really learned to love myself, I perceived I was trying to change him to make him love me the way I wanted to be loved. And when I realized that wasn't how that worked, that he was never not honest about who he was. He was always who he said he was. And when I realized that, I went, wow.
Yeah.
Boom. And I was like, I need to help other people with that perception as well.
That's wonderful.
So, yeah.
Thank you for explaining that so beautifully. I feel like you're explaining everything so beautifully. So maybe that's your 3. I'm not sure.
It's probably my 3. It's probably my communicator.
Yeah, totally.
That's why I'm here.
Yes. What other modalities do you work with as well?
I do a modality called Touch for Health, which works with the meridians. It's also frequency work. So it's muscle testing, and it helps find blocks in the body and can help with the body. So I have something for the mind, body, and spirit. So that was what I was looking for with spirit. I was like, okay, you guys, help me round out my services. Yeah. So now I have something for everything. And then I can also use acutuning for blockages as well. So, and that's really like fascinating work.
What's acutuning?
So I use frequency through tuning forks. And so you can use the tuning forks, not unlike acupuncture or acupressure. You can use the tuning forks on those points on the body and release blockages there as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And it's quite quick, because once the block's removed, it's moved. So it's like people get quite instant relief from certain things. That said, you might have this book in your references as well, but I use the Metaphysical Anatomy book by Yvette
Actually don't
Rose.
have that one.
Oh,
You said
it's Louise Hay on steroids.
Okay, yeah, because I had like just that little kind of Louise Hay book, and I wanted it to go a little bit deeper.
You need to get that book. It's got almost 700 different diseases or disharmonies in it, and it gives you the emotional reason that it's been manifested in the body or the mind.
Wow. Okay.
It's incredibly powerful. When a client comes to me and tells me they've been diagnosed with something, I just look in the book and I hand them the book.
Wow. Yeah.
Because it's not for me to interpret. Yeah. It's for them. And knowing is half, right? Half healed. You're half healed, just understanding why. So giving them the book and letting them decide, because there's several paragraphs and you take what resonates and you leave the rest. But yeah, that book will change your practice in your life as well.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I'll have to get on it, because I'm always wondering, like, and of course it's my energy. So I'm like, I'm a 7 and 9. So I'm like, what is the reason for everything? Right. Like ever since I was little. Exactly.
Why?
I'm always like, why, mommy, and also read books. So, because I'm always like pretty prone to like sinus stuff.
Okay.
And like the little explanation in the Louise Hay is like, well, you could be irritated by other people. And I can be irritable sometimes, but I was like, there has to be, there's more, I think, underneath that. So yeah. I'll
screenshot the pages for you for that, and I'll send it to you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay. So I have this little section in my notes. It's called Numerology Dorkout. And I get to do it so rarely. I actually had a blog talk show with my good friend. She's a numerologist in California. Her name is Tracy Wallace. And, she's maybe my mom. She's actually probably like my mom's age, but we clicked completely because it was someone else that I could kind of speak that language of numbers with. Like astrologers have like this wide network, professional organizations, libraries of books. There are plenty of numerology books. There are a lot of really good ones, but there's just so few of us. So whenever I talked to her, I actually went to go visit her a couple of years ago with my mom. So it was me, my mom, her and her daughter, all having dinner, drinking wine almost every night. And Teresa and I would be talking to each other with numbers. And my mom and her daughter were like, what the hell are you saying? Like, can you talk like a normal person? You're speaking another language, right?
Right.
So I guess I want to know, what pinnacle are you in now? And what was, because you were talking about those seasons. So I was wondering if you could kind of talk about the numbers of those seasons and kind of how you got from point A to point B.
Well, the frequencies are going to be the same kind of energy that the numbers are always. It's just what umbrella is over that period of time for you. And this is something that anybody can look up online. And I always encourage people that if they want to go deeper, like if they want to know more about sevens, then they can do that. Because what I give them is more of their, the blend of who they came here to experience. So it's going to be a little bit different than if they look it up. They might find more words that they resonate with. Because there's so many descriptors for each number, and a lot of them cross over because we have families of numbers that go together. So
totally,
there's a chart that you can get print offline, and it has them all. And so depending on your life path will determine your first pinnacle, and your first pinnacle is actually your attitude number. So you would take your month and day and add them together and reduce them unless they're a master, right? And that'll tell you what your first pinnacle, what the ages are that run through that, and also what the frequency of that umbrella is going to be. So you said your life path's a 9. So your first pinnacle was at 27. And that would have been a 9, right?
Yes,
and then your second pinnacle is determined by adding your day and the year together. And then your third pinnacle is adding your first pinnacle and your second pinnacle together. And then your fourth pinnacle is your month and year. So for me, I'd have to calculate it. So 20, 28. This is a 1 for me. I'm in a 1 because it's your month and year. So 8 of 73. So I'm in a 1. So this is the end of mine for me. This is my last pinnacle. Oh, actually, I'm wrong. That's not actually until I'm 51.
No worries. No
but
worries.
It's coming up. Like I'm already jumping into it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm already approaching it.
Yeah.
I'm about halfway through my 3rd pinnacle. I actually haven't looked at my own in a long time. So when you asked me what I was in, I was like, oh, wow, I don't know. Let me look really quick. So would be a 1 plus 22. So 23. So that would be 5. So 6. So my 3rd pinnacle would have been a 6. So I'm still kind of building a family right now. I'm expecting a grandchild.
Really? Congratulations.
I'm moving into my personal year of 6 and she's due here real quick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So like all of this kind of perfectly timed. My daughter who's having her is moving into her 1.
Yes.
A year of 1. Cool. So her new beginning. And then I'm moving into expanding my family as a 6. So yeah, there's a lot going on. But that umbrella that oversees like that cycle. So your first cycle is long, your second cycle can be, or third cycle, your second and third cycles are only always going to be 9 years. And then your 4th one is longer if you choose to stay. Right?
Yes, totally.
So
yes.
I always like, it's always a choice. I like people to know that they always have choices.
Yeah.
So how you want to live out this. So this 1 is me. Am I going to step into that leadership role? Where am I going to choose when I get to that point? What will be where I'm going to spend the rest of my story? Whatever it is, I'm going to be pioneering, starting things, right? Like that 1 is really going to be motivated. I'm going to take all the things I learned through my other 3, the rest of the life I've led, and I'm going to share it with everyone.
Yeah.
So
it's a nicely ambitious energy. I mean, if you have your own business, you're going to be like, there's really kind of no stopping you, honestly.
And if you look at your astrology is your sister. It's numerology and astrology are mirrors of each other. They just find the answers different ways.
Absolutely.
I kind of appreciate the simplicity of numerology.
I do too.
In that way.
It cuts to the deeper issues very quickly.
Yeah.
And kind of like, this is your path. This is your lesson. This is literally your challenge in the challenge.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So I love talking to my astrology friends when I want current immediate detail.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's going on with this? And it's just that they pull from so many different, like, for them to be proficient at what they do. Oh my goodness, the amount of knowledge.
Yeah.
Never question paying them for their services because they put so much energy into preparing a reading for you. It's amazing how much energy goes into, especially if they're adding in all of the comets and like all the extra stuff, right? Like, wow.
Yeah.
And the meaning of
to
things.
Be able to synthesize a coherent reading from that, I think is pretty incredible. I'm about to do, of course, my 7 is like never satisfied. I'm like, more. So I'm going to start a professional astrology certification next month. That's like
wonderful.
Over a year. Yeah. So I'm excited because
I'm excited for you.
Thanks. It's fun. I did the chart for this call actually.
Oh.
And it was, it had a Scorpio rising. And I was like, oh, we're going to get deep today, children. But also I think the moon was still in Gemini. So it's nice and chatty, which I think kind of vibes with both of us. So anywho, okay. Anything else I want to ask you about that? It might come up again. But I guess let's go ahead and transition into the wackadoodle energy that has been this year. And the energy that we're going into, and then also specifically, I'm curious on how you see the last portion of this year, kind of starting in September. So let's get your take on 2020, basically.
Well, I even look back to the beginning of the 9-year cycle we started.
Oh, yeah.
Obama left in the 9, Trump started in the 1, and it was truly a new beginning for this country, for the world, because he didn't just work on this country. Like, he affected everybody around the globe with his choices. And so I see him as he's a powerful catalyst for change. He has single-handedly been able to bring so many things to the surface that don't work.
Right.
And so this year, it's kind of culminated into, okay, what doesn't work? Where's our foundation? We need to tear down what doesn't work and rebuild this, because this is not working. We're on sand, right? There's only so long that everything could continue the way it was going before it all collapsed and washed in, right? So I feel like that's where we are. We're there with our human rights. We're there with our with the political unrest, with the racism, with the sexual rights, with the sex traffic. Like, good Lord, what hasn't come up in this 4 years?
Yeah. Well,
it's like here.
We're in this 4 universal year now. And so, because when you add up, just for people listening, the universal year number is when you just add the digits of the year. So 2 + 0 + 2 + 0, right? So that's the 4. So, and 4 is about our foundation. Like, it's about our health too. It's like our health. Like, I was like, when you're in a 4 year, it's kind of like your, it's like a get down to business kind of year. It's like a year you don't really want to mess around. So
it can be a harsh one. It can be very black and white. So like, things that you've been ignoring won't be able to be ignored anymore.
Right.
It brings it to the surface. It's your teacher. It's all about for me, when I think about 4, everything comes down to security.
Totally.
So feeling safe in your home, in your country, in your job, in your relationships, in your finances, you name it. If you can have an insecurity about it, depending on where you're coming from in that year, it can be a great year of security if you've laid the foundation that needed to be there, or you can be, like I said, on sand. So as a world, we have gotten out of control, and we built a lot of things. And it's almost like people figured out a system, a way to rob things that hadn't quite come to fruit yet. And they'd already picked things that shouldn't have been there. They needed those to be there. And we've taken away from a lot of different things in our story. Like, just in America, we borrowed from funds that should never have been touched, like Social Security. We've borrowed from, so many places we've borrowed things from that we shouldn't have taken things from. And it's basically, it's like playing Jenga, and we pulled all the blocks out of the bottom, and now they're teetering on the top, and it's going to fall over. And that's kind of what a 4 year looks like for me, when it's not been done in a good, not done well. Right.
Absolutely. That's such a good delineation. I think a really perfect description of kind of what's going on. And just because of the widespread insecurity we've been feeling so acutely, and it's hard to not totally unplug from that. You know what I mean?
And these aren't things that we've just done to ourselves. These are things that we have perpetuated for 50 plus more years.
Totally.
Right? We've lost generations, and generations have perpetuated and come to this culmination. And so I look at that and I go, yeah, well, it's time for this to fall. And I don't see it in a negative light. I see it as, this has to go away or we can't rebuild.
Yeah.
And I see the year of 5, which is all about, it's the rebellion. It's the rebuild. It's freedom seeking. It's pioneering. It's thinking outside the box. 4s like things to be in boxes. 5s don't believe in a box.
Right.
5s will kick your box over and get it wet and ruin it. So when you think about the energy of a 5, like, people are done. They are full up of this garbage.
Yeah.
They are calling out the people who created, or that. Now here's where the part comes in with the 4. 4s have to take ownership of their part of it. Like, in the post that you and I, that we connected on, I was talking about, when I think of the year of a 4, like we're in right now, I see the world around us, and everyone's pointing in the mirror.
Interesting.
And saying, you better fix this. This is your fault. Right.
Yeah.
And what's in the mirror? It's us.
Right.
We've allowed our politics to get out of control. We've allowed our officials to get out of control. We've allowed them to steal. We've allowed them to take things that weren't for them to take or borrow from, right? So we have to take personal responsibility for it. And even if we just look at the world right now, just take it to even a simpler level. People having to wear masks, right? Pointing fingers, like no one wants to take responsibility for this hot mess because everyone's already feeling insecure. And where do people act from when they're afraid? Fear is judgment, the need to control outside of you, and the need for approval from outside of you. So if you're acting or thinking or behaving from any of those three places, I guarantee you're coming from fear and not love like you think you might be, right? It's really interesting looking at it and just being an observer of also what's going on around me. But this 5-year coming in, people are like, you know, every year people go, next year is going to be better. And I just, I'm not laughing because I'm making fun of them, but I'm laughing because it's about to get real. And they're like, can it get more real than this? I go, well, it's got to get cleaned up. I mean, we had to tear this stuff down. We're still uncovering things. Things are still coming out. We're going to have 5 years like a cleanup year. We're going to have to organize and clean up, and we're probably still going to be fighting for some stuff that's not being fair, right? And 4s are also about fairness. So
absolutely, which I like about which I like about a healthy 4 energy.
Right.
I do see okay, actually, before I move on to 2021, the 2020, those like repeating energies. So we know 2 is the sensitive, diplomatic kind of divine feminine energy. So I'm wondering how you see that specific number sequence of 2020.
Well, to me, 2s represent peace and harmony and love. With those 0s, that's amplification. If we are not in a place of harmony, we're not amplifying harmony. Right? So again, it comes back to where are our hearts and where are our intentions coming from? Right? And even people who are in fear are saying, no, we have to protect other people. Right? Well, but are you yelling at people? Are you communicating that in a way that people are going to turn away from you? Are you being counterproductive with the way you're showing that love? And that's sometimes, and you might recognize this too with the 4 energy, but like when a 4 is afraid, they're really just trying to create structure and security. But sometimes they don't have the tact to communicate that. And like, I have a sister that's a 4 life path. So her and she's been such a big teacher for me. She's an amazing teacher for me. And because I'm a 3 and she's a 4, and anytime numbers are right next to each other, they have like a challenge, right? And so I tend to be more free spirited, and she tends to be more grounded and tends to worry a little bit more. But she likes her structure. And so if I would just throw some caution to the wind, she'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Totally.
I didn't plan that. That's not in the plan, right? So I totally get that. And I so much love for 4s in particular because of what I've learned just from my relationship with her alone.
My dad's my 4 life path in my life. So I definitely I've just always been a little bit more like, whoa, like a little bit more loosey-goosey. Like it took me time to kind of connect with my own 4 energy. And he's always been very solid. Like he was always on time to pick me up from school, where my mom, who has very similar energy to me, was maybe about 10 minutes late. Anyway, I just always appreciate that about my dad, among many other things. And
I just squirreled. Like, I can't even remember. What was I trying to say?
That is such my classic 3 go-to shiny object syndrome.
Right. That 3. And add my 5 personality and then total squirrel. Massive
times.
Squirrel. I'm fine.
What's your destiny number, by the way? And do you use the full name of birth, or do you use your
full birth name?
Okay.
Is what I
some people
go by.
Don't, and I don't really get that. I'm like, you kind of want to use a birth name.
Well, and I always describe it to them this way. You know, when your mom calls out your full birth name and your like back goes erect? Okay, like that's her calling that. It's not like an energy that's like right in your face, but it's working in the background. And so like when someone calls you out in that, like you feel it and you're like, oh, I need to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
so
you have that 11 destiny, is that what you said?
yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
A little more, some more intensity.
Yeah, totally. And also like literally the spiritual messenger as well. Like it feels like it's very literal kind of in your life.
And I describe the 11 as a leader teaching others to lead through their loving example. So it's not about, a lot of us who carry master numbers feel this like we're in a pressure cooker.
Yeah.
But it's self-imposed pressure, right? Like we feel like we have to show up even more so. And a lot of us get held to a higher standard without understanding why we're being held to a higher standard. But it's because even though we may not know it, other people pick up on that vibration, and they might, like I would say, like you and like 3 other kids could have gotten in trouble for the same thing. But for some reason, you're going to get singled out, and they're going to say, I expected more from you. And you don't even know what. And the ironic part of that is that person with that master number is already kicking their own butt so hard for even getting in trouble. So it's kind of ironic.
I tend to attract 11s to me like moths to a flame. I have so many friends who are 11s and clients who are 11s as well. Yeah. And it's like there's always this spotlight on you guys. And it's like you're not always comfortable with it either. You know? So anyway.
I feel like that master numbers seek this out because they need to understand. I feel like they do seek it. So it is something that, and I would have to say, most of my like DMs come from people who are master numbers who want to know what it means.
Right.
They've calculated it themselves and like, what does this mean though? Yeah. So a lot of mine come from people seeking to understand their master energies.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because like you have to master the master number. It's kind of, it was always the adage that my numerology teacher always said.
Yeah. It's definitely been a journey. I mean, I just turned 47.
Oh,
it feels,
interesting.
Yeah. It feels, it's quite interesting when you get older, when you stop taking things personal, your whole, like if there was one thing I could tell people, is that nothing's personal. It's always projection. And then anytime you start to be triggered, I want you to remember that. And then they'll go, yeah. Right. I'm like, yeah. No matter what that person's saying or how hard they're coming at you, you're just a mirror. You're just shining a little bright for them, and they're using you as a target practice.
Yeah. That would have saved me many, I had a tremendous amount of worry, you know, even though I knew it was not logical, I still, the human part of me was like worrying about what do people think if I go into this kind of career, right?
Right.
And then you have all the imposter syndrome and everything else that comes with it. So I could have just been like, it doesn't really matter. And also you can't not do this. It's like, you just kind of keep coming back to it. So just stop resisting. Right. You know? So,
well, every time I tried to put something as a backup plan for this work, no.
I've done that so many times. So many times. It's always been like, what's my plan B? And I'm like, just don't have a plan B. Just do this. You
can't have a plan B. You can't. They won't even let you have a plan B. I'm like, I can't even pretend to have a plan B. Like, no.
You don't get one.
You don't have time for a B if you're doing your A.
No, that is very true. You have to do the crap out of your A, and you won't really want one. So, okay, let me ask you about, because I initially in that, I forgot what I even asked you about. I was just like, girl,
it was 2020. And that my interpretation of the energies, and it was the harmony amplified by the 0. And then when you added the 2 together, it came to the 4. So, and then it was kind of the interpretation, like how sometimes 4s, they just want people to be safe, right? They just want you to be safe. And sometimes they don't always have the ability to say that in a way that makes you want to listen to them.
Right. No, totally.
So, I spent a lot of time teaching people who have strong 4 energies how to communicate with other people so that they're heard. because that is such a big thing for a 4, is they need to feel heard or it's not over.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
So
that makes
yeah,
a
I
lot
spend
of
a lot
sense.
of time. That's something that's really important to 4s. They're very frustrated because their world is not lining up, and they're doing all the things they think are supposed to line it up. And then people aren't cooperating. And I'm like, let me help you get cooperation.
Totally.
Or at least figure out where the boundaries are and when you need to not bother with certain people.
My dad has always had the least tact of so many people.
Yeah.
You know, like,
they're very direct. They're
Yeah.
just very direct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally.
And that's
very direct.
probably very difficult for, I mean, that had to be hard for you as a sensitive humanitarian.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
well, yeah.
even
And
though you have the 4 in the background, it doesn't,
Totally.
it's still hard.
It just, and he actually has a 9 destiny as well. So, which I always found interesting because it was just like, there's this total kind of mirror energy going on. But it's also just been, you know, initially when you study numerology, of course, you're going to look at all of your family members and all of your friends and I was like, oh my God, he's absolutely, and he has a 5 birthday as well. So he's actually a really good storyteller. He's really funny. And like, he has these interesting kind of dualities to him.
Exactly.
Where structure, but also, you know, he's kind of I don't know. He's like a former Republican that's now for like super universal healthcare and is like very much for gay rights and all this stuff. And it's just kind of this study in like opposites. I think it's interesting.
The 4-5 combo is probably, I would say they have the hardest time in readings.
Oh, wow.
Mostly, I wouldn't say 4-5, like where your dad's 5 is in the birthday spot, but like attitude and life path. Like if you have a 4-5 or a 5-4, I find that they have the hardest time because that need for structure and control versus that need to not be told what to do. Like I want structure, but don't tell me how to have it. Like that's a really tough reconciliation to find with yourself. So my sister is a 5-4, 5 life path with 4 attitude. And her son is a 4 life path with a 5 attitude. So she picked her little mirror opposite there to do a little story with there. Yeah.
Do you find numbers kind of run in families too? Because I've definitely noticed. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I would say, and I started out with the Glennis McCan's kind of guidelines, which really worked, but then I developed another one that really resonated. It's like 1s, 5s, and 8s need to be their own boss.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So in my mind, I mean, 1s, 5s, 1s, 5s, and 7s are my numbers, but 1, 5, 8 is very business. So I think about that when I see somebody who has those strong numbers in their chart and I go, you have a hard time keeping jobs? You have a hard time taking orders? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's because you need to be your own boss.
Totally. Yeah.
Because 5s do things in their own unique rhythm. They have to do them when they're inspired. You can't micromanage a 5. 1s are innovators, they're pioneers, they're big picture people, and 8s are delegators. They're executives. Like they run the show. Like I meet so many young 8s, they come in and they go, I said, you start a job and you think you need to be the boss the next day. And they're like, yeah, kind of. Yeah. And they'll laugh because it's true. Yeah. Because I mean, they just can see that there's a better, more efficient way to do something. It's just their nature.
I feels like the 8 really takes time to mature, I think, because they really kind of come in with a lot of power and it's like learning where to utilize that power because the 8 can really move the chess pieces like around the board. So,
and if they're not in a place, if they haven't, they have a hard time not starting at the top. And that's another reason they just need to be their own boss then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the 2s, 4s, and 8s, right? Any number that can be evenly divided in half or even, and I include master numbers because I don't see master numbers as 11s and 22s. I see them as mirrors of single digits, right? So even they're a mirror. So they're split in half. So any number that can be evenly divided in half has an extra challenge with balancing in whatever their area is. Like 2s are in the business of love. So self and others. 4s are in the business of security. 8s are in the business of power and position. 8s are unique in so many ways because, like, I always look at the sub numbers that created the 8. And when I look at a 26 or a 62, or even sometimes 35s, like, they're not the traditional explanation of what a straight 8 is.
No.
And I find people are very, and those sensitive versions of those 8s, I call them my soft 8s or my sensitive 8s. They're not power hungry. They're trying to help people. They're usually in healthcare. But if they're in healthcare, I'm like, you're in healthcare, but you need to manage the people who are doing the care.
Yeah,
and they're like,
totally.
Oh, that is so true. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, you're here to help, but you're here to help the helpers in a way, right?
I really have found going with the standard kind of definition of the 8 challenging. A lot of people don't really kind of recognize what I'm saying, especially if they don't have an 8 in their name, I found as well. Because if you go with like the traditional, like, oh, it's like achievement and what, you know, like power, they're like, I don't really, it's like, they're more like, well, money is just a means to an end for me, rather than like accumulation of like resources itself, which I just, so yeah, that was something I found early on. Even now I'm like, okay, how do I say this to you? Because they don't often recognize their power. And I'm like, yeah.
So explaining that power is many things, not just the traditional mastery of the material world, right? Like there's so much more to that 8 than that. And I also think about that. I think that way about all the numbers in their potential creator numbers, right? Like even in like a 1, like a 1-0, like a 10, like there's divine purpose behind that. They're limitless in how they can be that leadership. Well, let's so 5 and a 5, like that's another way a 1 can show up. So some 1s might show up, like maybe an 82 might show up. So if they're starting with their 8, if they come in like an 8 and end like their 2, like they're gonna come across a little different. Like they're behind that might be love, but they might not look like it from the outside, right? Their initial wouldn't seem like that.
Do you see a lot of, I think the way we calculate numbers might be a tad different just from what, because I think we probably reduce a little differently, but do you get the number 19 that pops up in your clients' charts at all? Like that kind of karmic number 19? I always find it interesting because that person is not going to resonate with the standard kind of 1 definition as well. No. because
that's kind of that tug of war again, right? So if the numbers are in a circle, whatever's next to it kind of challenges it. So having that 9-1 is a tug of war. Like they might be, they have struggles with putting themselves first, right? Well, if I have it, I should share it. Or they feel guilty because they want to do something for themselves. Like I always break that down for them, and they almost always get really emotional when I explain.
Absolutely, yes.
And so I think that's such a fulfilling thing for me to be able to help put people's hearts at ease about who they are. And I always tell people, if you get anything from my session, it's that you're not broken and there's nothing wrong with you. Like you leave here knowing that you are exactly who you came here to be. And on that note, so is everyone else. Right? Absolutely. So to help breed that acceptance, if we accept people the way they are, imagine what could happen. Like, it's not about judging them. They're not wrong because they do it differently than you. Right? It's really fascinating. I love what we do.
I absolutely do too, because people came here to do different things. Your version of success is totally different from someone else's version of success.
Absolutely.
You know, like I was, you know, like you look at someone who's like a roving kind of hippie and I'm like, oh, weren't you putting money in your 401k and like all this stuff? And I'm like, that is not their version of success at all. They're really kind of giving out their energy, as long as it's, you know, they're like healthy and whatever. But I wanted to ask you before we get out of here, just on kind of what you see, like the sort of cosmic weather pattern kind of for this fall and like just kind of until the end of the year. Because September is a 4 universal month in a 4 universal year, and just kind of what people, I don't know, need to know, kind of like the biggest takeaway and kind of how to navigate that energy. Do you have kind of any advice?
Honestly, I would say up front, I would just really be aware of what's yours and what's not yours. Because there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. And a lot of people are just going to be defensive. And that's one of the things when I teach for is how to communicate with other people is we never start our statements when you want to have a conversation with somebody with you, because the minute you say you, it's like pointing a finger at someone and they are already in their defense mode. So if we start with I think, or I feel, or I believe, right? Start with your I statements, because that's letting them know that this is you're owning it, it's yours, and you're not necessarily blaming them, but that you want to talk about something. Like that's going to be a huge conversation starter. Like I watch a lot of forums. I'm in a lot of groups on Facebook, and I just watch the conversations. I just want to see where people are. I want to see where they're coming from, and I want to see like what their knee-jerk reaction to things that trigger them is. And I just want to point out there's a lot of people who are a minority who are very loud when they're afraid. I don't mean minorities like, you know, what we think of. I'm talking about like people who are afraid versus people who are coming from a loving place. Right. Fear is a very loud energy, and it might not be as big of the population as we think it is. It's just that they're the loudest.
They just take up the most space.
they are just afraid, and they're really in your face about their fear. But there's a lot of people who are quietly just loving, and they're trying to keep that, ground that love energy into this planet. And I truly believe there are more of us than there are the people who are afraid. I genuinely believe that. And so if you have a loving message, I want you to keep putting it out there. And I want this energy of the Leo right now, this 8-8, I want people to not be afraid. I want you to have the courage to talk about your loving thoughts, to talk about your perspectives from a loving place, and not be afraid, because you're going to trigger some people with your light. And that's what I explained. People who are really lighthouses in this world, when you shine love on somebody who doesn't feel lovable, they lash out at you because they think that you're disingenuous, that you're poking at them, right? That you're being fake with them because they don't believe it. But that's not true. Just keep being a light, keep shining it, keep sharing it. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. I'm going to be a lighthouse till I die. I'm just going to, like, I know that there's love out there, and I know that it takes a courageous person to talk about love. I mean, you say love and some people just go, ugh, and roll their eyes, and you're like,
sure.
Oh,
yes.
I'm sending you extra. But if people aren't triggered, and this is kind of what 2020 has been about, people are triggered, right?
Yeah.
Their security's triggered. They're really holding tight to to the beliefs that don't work anymore. You can't force people, right? But what you can do is be an example, and keep being that example of love, and not shove it on them. Just keep shining, plant those seeds, and then maybe it'll rain in their head somewhere, and then it'll grow a little bit, right? And that garden will start. But like, I feel like that's a big message for like, is people just not to be afraid to say what they feel from a loving place. Like, I feel like people are like, I don't want to get yelled at. Like, there's a couple forums I'm in, and when I have chimed in, oh man, they like jumped all over me, and I was like, wow, you guys are really afraid. Like, I didn't take it personal at all. Like, I just perceived it for what it was, and I just went, wow, that's how you would behave when you're afraid.
I feel like there's a lot of energy right now where it's like all the Capricorn this year, all the 4 energy, it's like, this is what is. Like, I was listening to this other podcast, and she was describing it as like this earth energy, right? This is like, this is what is. This like this kind of apps, because 4 can sometimes be like, this is the absolute truth, right?
Yeah.
Or what they perceive to be the absolute. And we're, I don't know if you can hear that. Someone very loud. Just like right next to me. Okay. So we're kind of going into this more air element where it's more about communication and listening and like, so I just, people need to not be afraid to communicate and also to listen. Cause like, I agree with the feeling very, like, I mean, I've felt emotionally triggered all year, and it's where I think we're in some of the same forums, and like someone posts something and I'm like ready to just like tear them apart. And I'm like, okay, maybe that's not going to be super helpful. And so I just like step back, and I'm like, and I'm like, if it's really, really important, then I'll come back to this later. But I just like, if I had too much coffee, I'm just going to like, you're a dumbass. And I'm like, it's not,
or not enough.
Anybody. Yeah, exactly. So, well, I think I wanted to thank you so much for coming on. This is so much fun. And you have I have to say, you have a lot of light just kind of coming out of you. I can feel it. So yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved being here, and I love chatting with another person who can speak my language.
Absolutely. So how can people get in touch with you? And are your services just in person, or do you do stuff via distance too?
I can do intuitive sessions through video. I do those quite frequently since we've went into this current climate.
Yeah.
And they can reach me through text message first, and then I'll reply back to them. 402-960-0624. And they can just send a text and I'll reply, and we'll figure out a time to talk. And they can also, I am not a tech. I don't really care for tech. They can follow me on Facebook. Okay. I'm on Facebook. They can follow my center, which is Soulworks Center. Soulworks is one word. And they can also follow me at Dana Camp, Intuitive Numerologist and Perception Coach. And then I have a website, but I'm just going to be honest. I don't think I've touched it since March.
I got you. I understand.
Because I just don't see, like, I feel like technology is so crammed with what you get to see and how it's controlled when people can see your stuff. And like, I'm just this little website, and so awesome. Google's not gonna really show my things. And
I will get your and I'll put some of your public information in the show notes as well, so they can kind of just
that'd be great.
Or whatever it is. So,
they can email me too. But honestly, like, I'd prefer just straight up text me. Okay, yep, awesome. Just call or text me. If you call me, just leave a message, because if I don't know your number, I'll let it go to voicemail.
Same. I'm not picking that up. I don't know who that is.
But I'll totally call you back if you need me to call you. Like, if you're not a texter, I'm cool with that. But you'll have to leave a message, so don't be shy.
Okay, awesome. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like I'll have to have you on again. This is really fun.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, it'd be so fun.
Awesome. So thank you so much, everybody. And again, this is just go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you would like, or to make sure to subscribe to the audio version if you're listening to that as well. So thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you next time.